one thing that I'm learning and that I've been a little ignorant to is that like not every educator carries these values either. And so,
That's a good point.
like these are the times to have those conversations. And I know that administrators have to be cautious in the way that they're moving and cautious with like how they're incorporating all perspectives. But I do think it's a great opportunity to understand like who is on the team and who is not, and then figuring out what that looks like as well, right? Because how do you train for that? How do you develop people to understand these issues? How do you train for the fact that like our biggest priority is young people in this moment and their safety? And yeah, so I do think like I assume that we live in a world where like most people agree that having ICE show up to your front step is not an ideal situation for anybody. And I'm also curious about the people who might be teaching today that are like, no, like they absolutely should be here and like let's go help and support them. So I think that this is a time for a lot of those tense conversations that are going to pop up, and you're going to know who you're working with, and that is even more frightening because these issues are bigger than just immigration. Now we're talking about curriculum. Now we're talking about internalized belief systems around kids. Now we're talking about all these other issues that are highlighted by an ICE interaction, but really just say like, do you actually care about all students? Do you understand that most, if not all students have the opportunity to learn? When we're talking about equity here, like this is such a great opportunity to see like who values it and who doesn't. And I just fear that like not everybody's in alignment with that. So,
bro, you bring up such a point that I did not even think about. You and I are having this conversation. Folks that are listening to the show they know what my show, unless this is their first time listening to this show, they kind of know what to expect from my content. So I am assuming, and we are assuming that everybody that's listening, everybody at that school is about that life and really cares. But you're right. There could be staff members at our schools that, we should be doing that. It's about time. And I didn't even think about that because, again, I'm just like, to me, if you're in front of kids, you should care about all kids, like you said, like all kids, no matter what their background, whatever it is. They're in your classroom, they're in your school. We love them. We should love them. Yeah. But then, and you know, a lot of schools, we try our best not to talk about politics and things like that because it could ruffle feathers and that could be a whole nother thing. Yeah. So we're really are making a lot of assumptions at this moment. And again, we're about a month out before this publishes, and for all we know, things will be better. This whole conversation would be pointless. But I didn't think about it that way.
I got to jump in, and I think something that I have to remind myself is that like this is systemic. It's not just one person who's leading these ideas. It's a group of people that are working together to make sure that these policies, that these issues, that the rights are being undermined and underestimated in so many different ways. And these are systems that existed for longer than just last week and longer than the last 4 years and longer than the last 100 years, right? And so I'm hopeful that people understand that they still have power. I'm hopeful that educators and people on the ground understand that like there's still work to be done. I'm hopeful that they understand that it's not pointless or hopeless. It's difficult. Sure. It's draining. But the reality is, like, I heard this said on somebody I admire. It was like, we're on the verge of a new civil rights movement. Like they were just simply saying that, like, I didn't think that I would ever be a part of a new emerging civil rights movement. And here's like where we're headed. And that's really just hit me because we fixed racism back in the 60s. I don't know if you know this, but like in the 60s and the 70s, racism was like done. And here we are.
This is someone told you that it was done in the 60s and 70s?
I think we operate as a country like that. These are issues that are no longer, important or relevant. I think we operate under the fact that, like,
on paper,
is it on paper? Yeah. Because
okay.
I hear people talking about that out loud, right? Like, it has not been my experience.
Yeah, I was like, wait.
But I've heard people say that you're like, this is not an issue anymore. Sure. We operate in education like that sometimes because, like, here we are worried about, I don't know, like, Black history. We're worried about Latino history, and that's what's being taught to our schools. And we looked at the 1776 pride, like all this other crazy stuff that's happened, and that's just a continuation of this. Like we're going to continue to experience this, and that's what I hear. Like put on the batteries because like you got work to do, and it just doesn't. We can't stop fighting in this moment. We can't stop organizing in this moment, and we can't stop. This is a great opportunity to build relationships with community that you may have not traditionally worked with in the past. So
would you recommend, and if I'm off base, let me know. Stop me. right? Would you, because I was just talking to my safety committee the other day, and we're talking about the next drills that we do. So we do, you know, your traditional fire drills. We do your traditional active shooter drills.
Yeah.
Should we add in?
You know, it's interesting. I do think that there should be some training around what happens. And I also, this is where I would pull in some experts in the community, see like what's going on, only because this is real trauma. And if you do have young people who are on the grounds and they are happen to be undocumented and people don't know that, or like we serve kids that are part of mixed status families. I would hate to also create unnecessary fear. But I do think that working with local on the ground community organizers who understand these issues, they're going to have a better take about what that looks like. And I do think practice is important. And so if there's a way of doing a simulation that does not cause additional harm within community, that is important. But again, there are people who are much smarter and brighter than me on what this looks like. And it just comes with real consequences to young people who might be afraid of these moments. So
I'm with you. I'm with you on that, because even the active shooter, you got to be very sensitive with that, especially with that's a whole nother lane of safety concern that we're seeing a lot more. Yeah. So those kind of things still happen. So what I'm hearing is probably your best, especially if you're not just well versed in this, is to start looking on the local level, find some organizations that are offering support, that this is what they're doing, and they can collaborate with you, form those partnerships. That's to me where things should get started.
Yeah. Those experts are there in places like Arizona. There's a lot of organizations that are working collaboratively and collectively on that. In places in the Midwest, we might have fewer, although the ones that we do are incredibly talented and are working 24/7 right now to make sure community is safe. Again, if you're a school leader, this is an opportunity again to start searching locally and start building relationships with the local Latino community. And I hesitate saying that only because immigration issues are not just Latino and Hispanic issues. In Kansas City, we're seeing young people from all over the world. We're seeing influx of students from Eastern Africa. We're seeing an influx of students from North, South America, the Venezuelan, Colombian countries. So like it's a worldwide issue. It's not just a Latino Mexican issue. And so that's something that I like to remind people, that like there's a community of folks that are being negatively impacted by this. And also, even if you are part of if you're a citizen or you have status, like these issues impact you directly. The negative rhetoric around immigration and the negative impact of that impacts us all, not just people who don't have status.
Yeah, and I would agree that it's not just our Hispanic communities, Latinx communities. However, a lot of them are being targeted. Like this is kind of like a lot of the target is going that direction. Yes, there's absolutely folks from different countries. You got folks coming in from Ukraine. I didn't see ICE regulations going in to raid for Ukrainians. I'm just saying. So, but yes, you are absolutely correct on that. So look for local folks. Now, what if let's say I'm in a rural area and I don't have access to a local organization?
Okay.
What are your thoughts on, maybe are there some national organizations that you can think of, or what kind of suggestions would you have in that sense?
Yeah, I do like this idea of the ACLU. I know I'm getting a lot of my information right now from the ACLU, and I know that they have really great graphics and on like knowing your rights and whatnot. For the rural communities, I actually think about like, I would first assess what are our local leaders talking about, and are the local leaders understanding, like, where are they on this issue? Because it's interesting in Missouri that we have communities that are rural that are 90% Hispanic, Latino, and they have an incentive not to invite ICE or any other government agency into, because it would decimate their community in so many different ways. So I would try to want to understand like what's the community's perspective on this. Two, I would say that there are resources online that are helpful, and there are organizations like the ACLU. There's other immigrant-led and immigrant United We Dream comes to mind, where you can follow for those practices. And then three, I'm curious about how you would build community with those that are a part of that status. And how are you actually, as a person, having those one-on-one conversations with folks, so you understand what their fears are and you understand what's happening at that level, and understanding kind of what resources you could provide there as well, right? Oftentimes we shy away from asking questions, and oftentimes we're like, I don't want to, like, whatever. I think there are ways to lean into those conversations without harming anyone and without asking the wrong questions, so to speak. But people want to talk, and they want to know that they have people that they can trust. And these are one of those moments where there are people that are looking at school leaders and schools as places to have the right information. And so being able to be a part of community and to double down maybe on your parent engagement efforts, maybe to double down on opening up the school at different times so you can have those community conversations in a safe environment, that might help. Yeah, it's tough not to have those organizations around, and calling up people is also helpful, I would say. So if there's contacts out there to build those relationships, you may never know that there might be somebody that actually understands those issues on a local level that you're connected to as well. So
love it. All right. At the end of the day, like we said, maybe a month from now, things will be different, and this conversation may not even be all that important a month from now. So that's the hope. Maybe we wasted our time and the listeners' time.
Sorry about that. We had a short scare there, and yeah.
So okay, all right. Well, listen. Either way, I've learned a lot, Edgar, and I'm sure our audience has had a lot of things to think about in this conversation. I'd love for you to take us home with any final words of advice you want to provide to our listeners.
The first thought that I would have is that these issues impact all of us, not just the ones that are the most harmed by them. That we are learning that community building is such a critical tool right now, that we have to build trust within community. And that means that sometimes we have to be uncomfortable and lead into conversations that we may not know how to navigate fully. I also have been inspired by how community is coming together to address some of these issues. And so if you can create spaces, or if you can host meetings or bring leaders and others together to support the work, you'll find that there are people that are willing to do that, and they're willing to be a part of those conversations. The other thing I always offer to folks is that I don't believe that the education of a child is just the school's or district responsibility. It is the responsibility of the entire community. So if you're listening and you're not an educator, but you're thinking about becoming an educator, or you don't know what's your next step, everything starts at the school level. And so build relationships with your school leaders, offer them the support, see what they need, and show up for kids. The reality is education is still happening. Kids are still going to school. You're still seeing so many other issues that need to be addressed in these moments. And so community has some of those answers. Community has some of those resources. And now is a time, if you haven't already, to start building those relationships more deeply and leaning into that kind of mentality.